giggling.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. All right. So we just read the first 7 verses of Daniel chapter 1, and we see that Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and others were taken in to Babylon, but they weren't going in as captives. They were going in to be students, to actually become rulers in the kingdom. And we saw that first gate, which was the Ishtar gate. And we saw how impressive that was. So we're looking now at exactly a little bit more about it. It was part of Nebuchadnezzar's plan to beautify the empire's capital. And he restored the temples of Marduk and some of the other gods. He built the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which you may have heard of. If you do a Google search on that, you can see what they believed they looked like. And he built this amazing gate. It was called the Ishtar Gate. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It was named Ishtar because it was dedicated to the Babylonian goddess Ishtar, but he primarily paid homage to other Babylonian deities, mostly to Marduk, okay? The animals represented on the gate, okay, so let me take you to that. All right, this is the Ishtar Gate of Babylon. It was uncovered by archaeologists back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, and it was taken piece by piece and reconstructed. This portion of the gate is reconstructed in a museum in Berlin. Okay, let's see if I can go backwards. Okay, hang on. Oh, here we go. All right, so this is what it looked like when they were walking up to it. And this is the actual gate in Berlin. All right. There were animals on the walls on each side. And when they walked up this passageway, so they would have come in that gate and started walking up this way. These walls were 50 feet high, and they were adorned with patterns of animals. There were dragons and bulls and lions. The animals were symbolic of certain deities. The lions were associated with Ishtar, which was the giver of life, bulls with Adad, and dragons with Marduk, respectively. So they're talking about Ishtar being the goddess of fertility, love, but basically life. And Adad was weather, and Marduk was the chief of the gods, the national god. Okay, so these gates, then, you can imagine, just imagine in your mind being Daniel or Shadrach, Meshach, or Abednego, and having left Jerusalem, and which you thought was the most amazing, the temple was the most beautiful building in the world. You come up to this gate and you come into this city, and you're walking down this colonnade, this wonderful road down the center, and these walls on either side are 50 feet high. The highest thing that gate's the highest thing you've ever seen. Okay. And you're walking down there, and on the walls with all of these lions and bulls and dragons and flowers and beautiful yellow tiles. And under each one of them, the road itself was paved with red and yellow stones. Okay. And then each stone had an inscription on it, which was a small prayer from King Nebuchadnezzar to the god Marduk. So this whole thing, all this red and yellow and blue, all these gorgeous colors, just imagine how that must have impacted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What did they know? They knew that that God was their God. They knew that God had instructed them to build the temple. They knew that they did temple sacrifices to please God. But now they come up to this. And that must have been quite a shock to them. Okay? Imagine that you know who God is, but now you come up against something that is more spectacular and mind-numbingly beautiful than you could ever have imagined. Okay? So put yourself in that place, because that's where they were. This is the animals that these are actual tiles from the gates and the walls that Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel walked past. All right. The bull, you see, it's covered with these stones. These are actually gemstones. All right, lapis lazuli and rubies and emeralds, and they were covered with all of these gorgeous stones. Now, you don't see all of the adornment now, because obviously people have stolen them and, sold them for money and whatever. But I actually got to see these panels, these portions, because some of them, a lot of them are in Berlin, but they have been taken to other museums. I saw them in Turkey. There's a museum in Turkey where they have some of these, one portion of the wall in their museum there. So you can just imagine, these are gorgeous. The panels themselves, the animals, are about 6 feet high, each section, 4 to 6 feet high, each of the animals that you see as you're walking past them. And they were rows of lions and dragons and bulls, just lined up in rows all along. Okay, so I want you to think for just a minute. I'm going to give you a few minutes to talk about this. What kind of emotions would the young man have felt upon arriving in Babylon? What would have been the impact on them? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you, if I can, hang on. Okay, can't do it. So just talk among yourselves for just a few minutes, maybe about 6 minutes, 6 or 7 minutes, about this question, what they would have felt, what they might have thought.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so the point that I want to get across to you is that it's kind of like when you're growing up and you grew up in church and everything, you kind of know what everything is, and the people that you're with, and then all of a sudden your mother drags you off to Brownsville, Texas. And it's not the same anymore. For that's a really small example, because it was culture shock. I was used to being able to walk to church, and there were no Protestant churches anymore that I could find that I could walk to. Okay. But if you took that and blew it up 100,000 times, okay, so that you are now in a place that is way more impressive and fantastic than you ever could possibly have imagined. All of a sudden, your life that has been all about God, all of a sudden is like, now it's like small compared to what you're seeing. Okay. The challenge to their faith at that point would have been tremendous because God had let them be taken to this place. Now, Daniel and his friends at least had this. Dion, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
All right. So
Yeah, no, I did.
they did have the assurance that God had said, go to this place and live there and make a life there. All right. So do that. And so they did have that to hold on to. But I'm telling you, it would have been really hard. What?
Sorry. Hey, can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine.
Oh,
Yeah, we
good,
can hear
'cause
you.
you couldn't. Okay, because I don't think you could hear us for a little while there. Sorry, I'm bringing a whole new laptop next week.
Okay, sounds good. All right. So this is what I wanted you to get was there was it was a tremendous it was a tremendous challenge to their faith. It was a tremendous challenge to their faith, to what they knew now was their life, their little lives. Now they know how little their lives have been and how so far away from what else is in the world. Okay. So where is hang on. Okay, so let's read from verses 8 through 16. So so let's see. Who else do I have over here? Julie, would you read 8 through 11 and Tammy 12 through 16, please?
But Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. Now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the eunuchs. And the commander of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has appointed your food and your drink. For why should he see your faces looking more haggard than the youths who are your own age? Then you would make me forfeit my head to the king. But Daniel said to the overseer, whom the commander of the eunuchs had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah.
Okay, Julie or Tammy, who's doing next? Okay, you must
Sarah,
be muted.
Can I pass for just a moment?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, Virginia, you want to read that for me?
Sure. Please test your servants for 10 days and let us be given some vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be observed in your presence and the appearance of the youths who are eating the king's choice food, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, their appearance seemed better, and they were fatter than all the youths who had been eating the king's choice food. So the overseer continued to withhold their choice food and wine they were to drink and kept giving them vegetables.
Okay. these 4 young men have come into this amazing city, and they're taken into the portion of the royal palace complex where they're going to be trained. And they find out, now, I don't know if you were ever the top in your class or did really well in school and then went off to college thinking that you were really smart, and you found out that there were a lot of people that were as smart or maybe even smarter than you were. Okay. So here are these young Jewish boys, and they, having grown up with their own people, now they're taken into this place where there are young men from other cultures there. Okay. And they know different things than Daniel and his friends did. Okay. So they have this culture shock of this glorious place that they're coming into. And of course, I'm sure the palace where they took them were just spectacular. And now they're meeting other people from other cultures that are also very smart and good looking, because they also would have had no defects and they also would have been good looking for their cultures. Okay. And then now there's something else that happens, because and this would have been very difficult for these young Hebrew boys, because they are taken into the place where all the boys are castrated. They're made eunuchs. There would have been 2 things of that. First, number 1, the pain, obviously, the pain and what it does to a young man when he loses the part of his body that makes the hormones, right? So there's that. But the worst, even worse than that, the most terrible thing about it was this. In the law, a eunuch was not allowed to enter the temple. A eunuch was not allowed to enter God's temple. So, on top of having to leave their homes and go to this place that is amazing, then having to go through that process of castration, and to know deep in their hearts that they can never again go in the temple. These were terrible things emotionally for them to deal with. All right. This is a lot for a teenage boy. And that I really want you to think about that, because we read the story and yeah, he went in and yeah, he did this, but all this stuff that led up to what comes next was really, really, really difficult for them. Life-changing. It was a terrible thing. So this is where Daniel is in his thought process and his emotional process when he comes into this situation where they're being told now that they are to eat this particular food, which he knew had been dedicated to gods. All right. So I want you to think about that. Because how was it that Daniel had the courage to stand up against the commander of the eunuchs? How do you think he had the courage to do that after all of this that had pushed him down, down, down? Why was it that this was the one place where he draws the line? Okay. Why do you think it was that this was the one place that he drew the line? Okay. So, let's see, I'm not sure how to do this. Dion, you're right next to the computer, right? You're right next to it? So if I do a breakout room for about 10 minutes, can you join your breakout room?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. I'm going to see if I could do that. No, I can't find it. It's disappeared. Okay, maybe I have to stop sharing. Hang on. Okay, now I can do it. Okay.
Guys. Oh, hey, the computer heard me. It recognized me. Can you guys hear me? Ah!
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Okay, so Dion,
Yay!
I'm putting you in room 1, so just accept that.
Room number 1. Sorry, I got a lot of muscle. Kenton.
The rest of us are going to be in room number 2, so you guys need to join room number 2, okay?
Okay.
All right, and Dion, you've got 10 minutes to do those 2 questions. How did Daniel have the courage to stand up, and how do you think how did he get the courage to do that? And then how do you think he posed his request? How do you think
Okay.
he came up to it? Okay, so
Yep.
you got 10 minutes.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so you guys need to join the room. So just join it. Mary, where'd you go? Where is everybody? Good grief. Oh, I'm not in the room. That didn't work. Hi, little guy. Okay, so we were talking about how Daniel, can you hear me, Dion?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry if I cut you guys short.
Hear me now?
Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to point out was that Daniel, when it came time to start, is that Brad? So one of the things I wanted to point out was remember that all of these things that were happening to Daniel, there wasn't really much he could do about it. But when it came down to the food, we were talking about why they had those rules. Remember, God had given them these dietary restrictions that set them apart from the rest of people. And so when they were in these camps of these other people, now it is in the food that they can step apart. And so that's why he would have had the courage finally to stand up and say, well, and he's not refusing. So one of the other question was, how did he pose the request? How do you think he actually went up and said that? Somebody in the room over there.
He sought permission.
He
Did you
what?
hear that? He sought permission.
Okay, he sought permission. He didn't just say, we're going on hunger strike. No, he politely asked, and he gave the reason. He said to him, please test us for 10 days. All right. In other words, he didn't give a moratorium. He said, just give us 10 days to try it. He didn't say, we're not eating that meat sacrificed to idols. He didn't say anything that would have been negative about what they were eating. Would you please this? And at the end of 10 days, then you can decide if this is what you want to do. If you'll be willing. So it tells us that
In the middle of it. Yeah, they don't have much people and trees, whatever.
okay, who's talking?
We're having trouble hearing you. So.
You're having trouble hearing me?
She heard that. She heard that.
Oh, really? It's my microphone now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me see if I can pull my closer.
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
It's you.
because he asked politely, and because he just said only for 10 days, give us a try. Then the eunuch, the head of the eunuchs, listened to them and did test them for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, we read that their appearance seemed better and they were fatter than all the youths who had been eating choice food, so that the overseer continued to put their choice food in wine, which they were to drink, and kept giving the vegetables. So now remember that the head of the eunuchs is given a certain amount of food for these young men. And he has to dispose of that food. So I suspect that maybe he and his family had some good food, king's food for a while, because they were not eating the king's food. They were eating the food that fit with their dietary restrictions. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's see, who would read that for me? Mary, do you want to read Daniel 17? Daniel 1, verse 17.
As for the four youths, God gave them knowledge and intelligence in every branch of the literature and wisdom. Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams.
Okay, because they took that stand about the food, even though they knew that they were not ever going to be allowed to go in the temple again, even though that was taken from them, they were faithful to God's law. And because of that, God gave them the knowledge and intelligence in all of the things that they were required to learn in Babylon, literature and wisdom of the Babylonian culture, okay? And in addition, Daniel was also given the ability to understand and interpret dreams and visions, Okay. Because even after all that they had been through, and even though they knew that they weren't rejected by God, but they were not permitted to worship him the way that they had been raised to worship him, to do the sacrifices and everything. They didn't give up on God. Have you ever felt like God has given up on you? Okay. I think we've all been there. All right. Where we think that God can't love us anymore. Okay. But because they didn't give up on God, here is how he blessed them. And so I was trying to find a picture that would give you an idea of what that would look like. And this was the best I could do. There we go. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel, right? 4 young teenage boys that are healthy and strong and smart and ready to, excuse me, go and take the world, right? All because of their ability to listen and follow God's law. Okay. Let's read the last part. Dion, can you read that for us, please?
Me?
18 through 21. So you're just getting the
Oh,
computer read it.
can you hear me?
Can you see it?
Can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me, Sharon?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. All right. Then at the end of the days, which the king had specified for presenting them, the commander of the eunuchs presented them before Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and out of them all not one was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's personal service. As for every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king consulted them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and conjurers who were in all his realm. And Daniel continued until the first year of Cyrus the king.
Okay, so not only did they excel in learning the things that they were supposed to learn in Babylon, but when the king examined them, they weren't just top of their class. They were better, 10 times better than all the magicians and conjurers and all the wise people that were in his kingdom, all of his wisest people. It was like they were more intelligent, they had more understanding and wisdom than all of the teachers that they had had. Okay, my camera went off. All the teachers that they had had, and they were able to, because of that, be raised above everyone else that they had gone to school with. And that's how they ended up being in the king's personal service because of that. Okay, now my computer tells me my camera has gone off. Can you still hear me? Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So okay. So what gifts were they given by God, and what additional gift was Daniel given? Okay, everybody, you guys need to unmute yourself and answer the question. Does anybody speak up? So what were the gifts that they were?
Daniel could interpret. Daniel could interpret dreams. I can't say it. I'm too tired. I'm sorry. So the second part of the question is that Daniel was given an additional gift to interpret dreams. Yes. Sorry.
Right. And so what were the gifts that they were all given then? Look at the scripture.
Wisdom and understanding.
Right, wisdom and understanding. Now, if you will recall in the book of James, God tells us that if you want wisdom and understanding, you can ask God and he will give it to you liberally. Okay? He will give it to you liberally. And that's what he gave them. So, how do you, let's see, why do you think that God gave these gifts to the Israelite boys to be 10 times better than everybody else?
For their own protection.
For their protection, that would have been one reason.
I think because they had faith.
Okay, okay. So that he gave it to them because they had faith. All right. So do you think God had any other reason for setting the Israelite boys up above all of the other ones and even above all of the scholars in Babylon? Why would God do that?
Well, he was going to be dealing with the king.
Yes, yes, yes. He lifted them up above everybody else because he wanted them to do what he had called the Israelites to do from the very beginning, which is to show the world who God is. All right. And that is exactly what they're going to be doing. Is they're put in that position, they go through all of that, and then they're lifted up because God wants them to show the world who he is. So my question to you then that I want you to be pondering is this: how does Daniel and his friends and what they went through, remembering all that they went through to get there, how does that inspire you to meet the challenges that you're facing in your life? I really want you to think about that this week. How does what they went through, and that's why I showed you those pictures and talked to you about the incredible impact this whole move would have had on them, what they had to face, what they had to suffer in being castrated, and then standing up and following the law and seeing what God did for them in following that law. How does that inspire you to meet the challenges that you're facing in your life? Okay. So does anybody want to talk about that? You guys in the room, you can see the picture, right? You can see the
Yeah. Yeah, we can see it. We can't see you, but we can see it.
no biggie.
We'd rather
You saw it. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing that because I want to see all of you. Okay. So does anybody want to share on that? How
Yes.
yes, somebody wants to say yes.
Hear us.
So come up to close to the camera and tell me if there's anybody that wants to share how that might encourage you. You know, we've been through some really tough stuff the last couple of years, haven't we?
You have to come up to the mic.
Can you hear us?
Okay, if you're in the room, you need to come up close to the camera.
There you go.
I tried.
All right, here comes Brad.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me how it helps you or impacts you or what you want to say.
Well, I think it's easy to.
You have to get up to the computer, hon. There you go.
Can you see?
Ah.
Can you hear me? Yes or no?
Yes, I can see you.
Okay. I think it's easy to get lost in our day-to-day struggles, but just remembering what Daniel went through, it helps us put things in perspective and to realize that we are very blessed and that we need to, things that are challenging in our life, we need to trust God more to solve rather than try and figure it out ourselves. Yeah, God's on our side, the team says.
Yeah, yeah. Good. Okay, so we've all been obedient the last 2 years. At what point do you say, I need to do?
What was the last part of that question, Sharon? Can you say that again?
At what point do you say, I need to do something different than what I'm being told to do?
You think of that scripture, be still and know that I am God. That's how I
Okay,
get through it.
okay. And when we reach that point where we say, no, we're not going to stay home from church anymore, how do we approach that? Dion?
We go to church. We get in the car
Okay.
and go to church.
Okay. We've been through a lot, but there is a possibility that things could get worse. It's hard to believe, but when you look at what's happening in Australia and Canada and some of these other places, if we find ourselves in a position where we're being told to do something that now is in direct conflict with what we know God has told us to do, even though we've been through these other things, okay? We need to be willing now to take a stand and say, no, I can't do that. And if they say, well, I'm sorry, a religious exemption, we don't recognize that. Well, then we have to say, well, give me some time so I can show you. All right. And just being respectful, but holding our ground. All right. And we may have to do that. I hope we don't. But the whole point of this is, even though Daniel knew that God's law said that he couldn't be in the temple anymore, he did not stop following God first. And that is the most important thing that we need to know. We have got to love the Lord with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Okay. And we're very blessed that we don't very often have to do the strength part, right? But sometimes we do. And I hope and pray that all of you will take that to heart and just contemplate the lesson that we get. Because, I've heard this story of Daniel all of my life. Well, since I was a little girl going to Sunday school in church, excuse me. But it wasn't until I was putting this lesson together and pulling up the pictures of the Ishtar Gate that God brought to my mind to think about what that must have been like for them to go through that, all of these things that we talked about tonight. So I think he wants you to think about that too. And I'm going to let you go with that. You guys are there in the room and you can stay and talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to go ahead and put Dion in charge, and then that way I can leave your room there. But I want you to be thinking about that, okay? And I want you guys to get together and pray together. I'm going to have us, I'm going to put us into breakout rooms again, and then those of us on Zoom are going to pray together. So prayer requests, do we have any requests from you guys here on Zoom? Okay, let me just say, pray for Regina. She had her surgery. She sent me a message this morning and she said that the recovery is more difficult than she anticipated. So she asked for us to pray for her to get through that. Okay, she's in a lot of pain. All right, so I'm going to stop.